name is Pam Keefe. I'm the Vice President for Asia Pacific for HNI, and we're really excited to have you guys join us today. This is the third in a series of webinars that we're having every 2 weeks through this COVID period so that we can share the latest information on workplace and especially regarding furniture. And each one of our webinars has new information. In fact, we're learning every day. So what you're going to hear today is the latest that we know on the best approaches for a post-COVID world. I'd like to get started by introducing our team. First of all, Rahul Arora, who's the Deputy General Manager in India, based in Bangalore. Rahul, can you say hello?
Hi, everyone.
Rahul's your local contact.
Yeah.
And then our first speaker is going to be Lauren Gant, PhD. Lauren's based in the US. Lauren, can you say hi and tell them about your role?
Sure, good morning, good evening. I am in Iowa, it's morning here, so good evening to all of you. My goal in my role is really to think about spaces, products, and the built environment and how those places can promote health, promote comfort, and really promote wellness generally.
Thanks, Lauren. And next is Lisa Miller, our Director of Product Insights and Applications.
Hi, everyone. As Lauren said, it's good morning for me, but good evening to you. I am based out of Minneapolis. As the Director of Product Insights and Applications, my role is to help be that liaison between our design partners, our, excuse me, our end users, real estate partners, taking a pulse of what is out there that you're struggling with as far as product applications, how can we learn from those gaps and current situations, and then blend them into our engineering and product development teams to create meaningful product solutions.
Thanks, Lisa. And now Courtney Moline, our Sustainability Manager at HNI.
Hi, everyone. I am part of the Corporate Social Responsibility team here at HNI, and I help lead corporate sustainability efforts here, helping internal teams pursue initiatives that will have a positive impact on the company and the environment, as well as incorporating behind-the-scenes processes like helping our facilities get to zero waste to landfill, as well as educating customers and internal members and employees about our efforts.
Thanks, Courtney. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Just a few housekeeping things. We do have a chat box. If you have a question, feel free to drop it into the chat box, and we will be stopping for questions a couple times during the presentation and at the end if we have time. If we don't get to your question today, we will follow up by email and answer your question. So feel free to reach out to us with your questions. We'll go ahead and get started. What we're going to cover today, we're covering a few key areas, starting with how to safely bring people back to work, segueing to product application and cleaning and materials. So Lisa can go to the next slide. We wanted to share a quote from the president of Allsteel about how we are remaining committed during these uncertain times to offer leadership and workplace thought research. It's important to us to be able to understand how the world is evolving and what we can do to support you, both in furniture, but also just in thoughts. So a lot of the things we're going to cover today are not related to us selling furniture, but more practical applications and what can help you with your space. So thank you for joining, and with no further ado, I will turn it over to Lisa.
Okay, thanks, Pam. So in the next hour, we're going to be discussing two different dimensions that we are considering today in the workplace and moving forward. So the first is really about the people, the user experience. We are talking about what people are feeling, their anxiety levels, what is their understanding of what back to work looks like, from the moment they get on transportation to walking through the front doors and then regrouping with their colleagues. So we really need to think about how that person, individuals, we bring our whole selves to work, meaning our emotions, our anxieties, and our great knowledge and skills. And so we're trying to be really mindful of what that means. So that's really about the people, as we said. So the second dimension is spatial effectiveness. And here we're really going to do a deep dive into implications post-COVID to the physical workplace. Are we going to go back to a world of cubicles? we hope not. We're going to discuss that and some possible ideas and ways that we're looking at product development differently because of this. You know, we think at the end of this, we've all gone through so much. We hope that we can come out in a better place just because of what we've been through. So that is our hope. So how we're going to describe each of these two dimensions is through an infinity loop. This infinity loop looks a little different than a traditional infinity loop. And we did that because we really wanted to emphasize these 4 different phases that we're going to talk about very quickly in each section. It's much like a traditional design process where you begin with programming and you go through your process all the way to post-occupancy. So we think it's really important that we're not just coming here today to say, you know, we have 14 screen options to choose from, or, you know, just that we want to be incredibly mindful of the entire process. So beginning with how we assess and prioritize, where is your client at during this process right now? Let's level set and meet them where they are. What are some of the considerations and how are we going to solve for that? And that doesn't, again, mean product necessarily. It could mean cleaning the HVAC filters in the ceilings. What are you doing to implement, and how, very importantly, are you getting feedback to make sure it's working? We used to be measured on, you know, let's get seats in the building on time and on schedule, but now we're gonna have new measurements. And then once that happens, how do we adapt and reconfigure? This is a fluid process, and more so than ever. Okay, so with that, we're going to start with that user experience, and I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Lauren Gant. Lauren?
Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, so I mentioned at the top that I'm really focused on wellness and human-centric thinking, and we're understanding that this concept has a few extra layers now, and it's really becoming more important than ever. So we're going to start with trying to understand the user experience. Considering individual safety and their perception of safety is one element that's going to make going back to the office a little bit easier. So along with environmental changes or built environment changes, and along with these organizational protocols, we really need to be intentional about considering the individual's needs and their experiences. But I think there's a big silver lining here that if we can do this in the coming days and months, and we can sustain it in the coming years, will be nothing but stronger coming out of this. So that's my little optimism for you. So I want to start out by talking about why considering the user is so important. And in this next slide, I've outlined what I'm calling the prevention pyramid for psychological safety. If you're familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I sort of borrowed that concept from him. And the idea is that we need to have lower levels of this pyramid met before we can reap the benefits of higher levels. And I've really adapted it to be thinking specifically about our current needs and specifically about psychological safety. When I say psychological safety, what I'm talking about is an individual's perception and really their internalized assessment of their immediate surroundings. So whatever's going on around them, it's really how they're processing that information. There's a lot of words on this slide, but I'm going to simplify it a little bit and just talk about these levels as I feel safe, I feel supported, and I feel seen. So at the bottom of this pyramid is I feel safe. And this is the idea that employees really need to trust that their physical work environment and the protocols that are in place are really fostering their health. So this could be things like visible cues of precautions, clearly communicated and understood protocols. And at some point it could be even considering things like the smell of cleaner, if that's a triggering smell and a triggering odor, perhaps we start thinking about things like lavender smells or other calming smells. This could also be air quality. This is going to be a huge thing. How are we communicating what the air quality is doing to our employees as well? The middle of the pyramid is I am supported, or I feel supported. So beyond our immediate physical health, employees need to, we may be feeling anxious about a lot of different aspects of our whole life. And we really do bring our whole lives with us. We come to work as a whole individual. So we may be feeling, for example, anxious about our ability to maintain my position in the organization, or to be seen as a productive contributor by my peers and my leaders. And I may also be feeling anxious about my ability to support myself and my family. So really feeling supported is this understanding of the systematic organizational players that are going to support me as a holistic individual. So this could be, some examples might be understanding the health resources that are available to me as an employee and to my dependents. And then also an understanding of the flexible work options that are available. So if I need to be at home, what is available to me? Or if I need to be in an alternative location, or if I need to work alternative hours, what are those options that are available to me as an employee? So I am safe is the bottom. I feel supported is the middle, and the top, the pinnacle of this pyramid is really I feel seen. Employees really need to feel comfortable voicing their ideas, their concerns, and should not feel like they're being judged or penalized or embarrassed when those voices are made with the genuine intent to contribute or to progress or to improve. The phrase I like to say is to feel heard is to feel seen. So I have a feeling there's going to be lots of awkward moments in the coming days as we come back together. You know, can we have the grace and gratitude and generosity to hear people's concerns, to hear people, you know, saying, I'm a little bit uncomfortable with how close you're standing, or could you please wipe that down? Can we hear those? Can we act without having any hard feelings? The cool thing is that a lot of research has shown that environments that where employees feel like they are psychologically safe are also cultures where innovation and creativity is fostered. So if we can express our ideas openly and honestly, we're only setting up an opportunity to come out of this even stronger. So next I'm going to walk through the 4 phases that Lisa outlined at the top of this presentation. The first is to assess and prioritize. So when we're thinking about the user experience, we really need to first understand what employees need now to feel safe and comfortable. And this is going to be probably a wide variety of thoughts and feelings because everybody's had a different personal experience going through this. So the first and foremost, we need to understand these concerns, needs, and really the expectations that people have when they come back to the office. So during this phase, we're working to understand this complexity. One idea would be to create cross-functional teams to have a deeper, fuller conversation of the span of concerns, ideas for protocols. So for example, gathering individuals from different groups, locations, experiences, and really hearing what they have to say. The next phase is to consider and solve. And in this phase, we're taking that information, employers are taking that information and really considering initiatives to address. So we're generating specific plans, both tactical and policy-based, and communicating them effectively with everyone. I'm going to say communication a lot in this phase. This is, it's going to involve a lot of communication, ideally in multiple formats and multiple phases, just to make sure everybody's on the same page of understanding. So going back to this idea of psychological safety, the way people communicate may also be impacted not only by our physical distance, but by also by the personal protection that we're using to keep us safe. So for many people, these masks are going to be a reality, and that's probably justified, but these masks are also may impact how we process material. So people who have different abilities hearing or processing information may disproportionately be disadvantaged by this because they cannot see people's faces while they're speaking. They can't see people's mouths. So the idea, can we explore different different materials, different ways of protecting individuals, different materials to allow people to see their masks, these clear masks, to help aid this communication. On the right here, there's some research that shows that people who wear masks are also seen as less empathetic. So this group of doctors was so smart. They taped pictures of themselves happy and smiling to show that I am human, I am on your side, I'm a friendly helper. You don't have to be scared, even though I've got, you know, my face completely covered. So the idea is, can we understand what the barriers to our communication are going to be, and can we start thinking about ways to overcome those? I'm not saying we shouldn't do those things, we just need to understand how we need to compensate for them. Okay, the next phase is implement and feedback. So here we're really looking at how are things going, how well are we doing, what do we hear people saying, are we still on track with current recommendations? And really importantly, we need to close this feedback loop. We need to continue this communication with employees. You know, if we're collecting data from them, we really need to circle back and say, this is what we're hearing you say. You know, even if we can't meet you 100% where you want us to be, even if we can't do everything you're requesting, we hear you. This is what we are doing. This is what we're able to do. Here's some alternative suggestions. That sort of communication can really make people feel like they're being heard and being seen. And in our feedback, we may hear that we maybe need to be doing more. We need to be addressing people's stress. Here's some ideas about how the built environment can really impact stress levels. This idea of moderate visual complexity. So here's this beautiful picture of Falling Water by Frank Lloyd Wright. And this really illustrates this idea of moderate visual complexity, where there's interesting things to look at, but there's also repetitive shapes that ease people's minds, that promote this sense of calm. Also outlined here is this idea of biophilia. Biophilia is really the idea that humans have an innate connection with nature. And research does show that it really, when we're connected with nature, we do have measurable impacts to decrease our stress levels. So biophilia might be literally bringing plants into our workspace, but it also may be consideration of natural light, keeping that lighting in tune with our circadian rhythms, using natural patterns, natural elements to sort of suggest that idea of nature. And then we need to start thinking the last phase here, which is not really the last phase, but the last phase in our loop, we need to adapt and reconfigure. So as we learn more, this situation is going to change, and we need to really be able to change accordingly. We really need to be able to continue this loop of listening, responding, and communicating with our employees. And ideally, if we're able to do this, if we're able to fully consider the user experience, we can allow it to really make our work environments more human-centric and really foster that idea of health, happiness, and well-being. So one example of just a really cool way that people are coming to support each other and having this idea of resiliency. This is just one example of a town near San Francisco in California. We're calling this a micro social safety net. These individuals, many individuals in this town, were heavily hit by economic implications derived from this pandemic. And many of the individuals in this town started to use their own talents to help each other through these hard times and really come together as a neighborhood. Many of these people fully admit that they did not know each other, even though they were living in close proximity to each other before this all started. So you can see them having appropriately social distancing dance parties and setting out a free food bank where people can donate and take as needed. And also this idea of this bakery, so he's lowering some bread in a basket. The message here is that we really have the opportunity to reconnect and support each other. And we do have the opportunity to build each other up while we're building a stronger workplace as well.
Okay, we're going to pause for a minute for a poll here. So the poll will come up on the screen, and while we're running the poll, we will answer one of the questions that we've been submitted ahead of time. The first question is, we would like to know going forward, will there be an impact on furniture and in furniture design in modular? Will open offices now go back to the old concept of cubicles and having partitions in between every person? If yes, will this be a temporary design feature or will it stay?
Okay, well, this is Lisa. I'll take that one. I would say, I think I mentioned it earlier, I hope we don't completely revert back to some older planning methodologies. We've come so far with more engagement in the office. I think as we work through this transitionary period and we do some additional distancing elements, which we're going to talk about next, paired with, you know, so many of you on this call overnight were forced to learn that you could work remotely, where maybe that wasn't something that you ever thought you might do. So we're seeing just a lot of different avenues where that balance of more distributed or remote work paired with new protocols within the open office. We think that we hope that it will not completely resort back. So, and we'll share some more examples.
Thanks, Lisa. Okay, why don't we go ahead and close out the poll and see the results? Okay, looks like the first question, what's the biggest challenge you're experiencing supporting customers and return to work strategies, aligning behavioral changes to the physical workplace? It's interesting, we did this same session last night in Singapore, and the two top answers were exactly the same from that audience as well. What are you or your clients most focused on right now? Clean and disinfect frequently. We're going to talk a little bit about that later on in this presentation with Courtney. So, okay, great. I think we can move ahead and go back to Lisa.
All right. So let's thank you, Lauren. I always love grace and gratitude. I so much appreciate your role and how you've shared all that great info with us. So now we're going to take that individual into the physical workplace. And this is a quote from our director of design at Allsteel, Amanda Gates. And, you know, no matter what we do with these physical additives, if you will, we still need to think about protocols. We still need to think about that wild card, which is human behavior, right? So it's all these things coming together. It's not just any one thing. So I think this is where we're all going to come to challenge here with how to do our best. So I'm going to start out this discussion around a concept that's founded in our HNI belief system, and that is we really, since our inception, we have been an RCI, rapid continuous improvement culture. And more recent, you know, all of that RCI has been really foundational in our manufacturing processes. But several years ago, we started pulling that into the office. And one of the tools and technologies we use is a term called poka-yoke. You may have heard of this term, but it basically means mistake proofing. A great example is this little girl on the right. She has, in her classroom, all of the students were asked to make their own version of a 1 meter hat to social distance from each other. So just a really lovely way to, very subtly, instead of having to put your arm up and saying, no, don't come near me, these children had this method to be able to communicate. So that's a great example of poka-yoking. A completely opposite example could be when we fly, hopefully we'll be flying again soon, that the pilot and the co-pilot each are given different meals. Therefore, if there were something wrong with the food, one would be sick. If one got sick, the other were able. So there's all kinds of ways you can use poka-yoking within your work, your daily life. All right, I'm going to go through the same 4 phases. Quickly, I'm going to start with our first phase, assess and prioritize. So this is really before we can start to say we would recommend screening in between benches. Let's talk about the work that's being performed. As I said, we're all learning more about how we are effective working from home for certain positions and certain people. Not everyone, but it's been eye-opening and I think a game changer for sure. So So for example, if we were to study a small team of designers, marketing professionals, and a product development team, as used in our own example, this is my world here, I work with these, our product development teams and engineers are asking to go back first. They need to be doing physical mock-ups and prototypes and be in our test labs. Whereas our designers and our marketing teams are, they're incredibly effective with technology. Certainly we are anxious to collaborate, and we all know that face-to-face collaboration is preferred. But I think we have to understand who can go back, what that looks like long-term, because that's one of the ways we're going to give ourselves some breathing room back in the office. After years and years of compressing the footprint, we're now stretching ourselves to a different direction. So some additional things in this phase one that I'm going to share several examples of our own environment, just so you can see what we're doing, and I'd be curious if they compare to things you're doing. We worked with a signage company. We did some great learnings with a large client of ours, and they hired epidemiologists, I have a hard time saying that word, and unique graphic design specialists that said, you need to really think about the signage in this time, because you've got to get people to read this. We need engagement and reminders. So, colorful, simple graphics that are easy to follow. Less words is better. So don't have more than 12 words if at all possible. Like, we had all these cues to create these really simple graphics. So we have made these, they're on brand. We don't want people to come back and see bright yellow, warning tape. We want, again, think about that psychological comfort. So that's everything from the messaging that the people are going to see and hear even before they get to the place, but then certainly once they get to the workplace. Whoops. So at this time, I'm going to turn our discussion, really important discussion around materiality, which has been such a huge question that has been coming up lately. So I'm going to turn that over to Courtney Moline. Courtney.
Thanks, Lisa. So when we think about materiality, we want to be considering how we interact with our surroundings and how we can limit some touch points. So we've got some examples on the screen here, things like implementing armless seating in conference rooms and common areas so that we can limit the amount of touch points between the users and the chairs. We can also install foot pedals on the bottoms of doors so that we don't have to open them with our hands. And then we can also move to having more stand-up meetings and having the furniture to support those so that we can maintain our social distancing and then again avoid those additional contact points between people and the spaces that they're occupying. We also want to consider what finishes we're selecting for our surroundings. And here I want to talk a little bit about antimicrobials. Antimicrobials are a really popular topic right now because of this idea that they'll make our environment safer, but that's not necessarily the case. The term antimicrobial is actually pretty broad and covers a range of effectiveness. So it can include things like a material that has an antimicrobial treatment on it to slow the rate of growth of certain bacteria like E. coli or Staphylococcus, or it could refer to something like a disinfectant, which is going to kill all germs and bacteria within a given time frame, like a bleach-based cleaner. What we want to be aware of is that generally antimicrobial treatments added to materials are being added to protect the material itself from degradation or mold or mildew growth, and in those cases slow the spread of specific bacteria. We are not seeing antimicrobial treatments added to materials to actually protect us from bacteria. And to the best of our knowledge right now, there is no antimicrobial on the market that has been proven effective against the COVID-19 virus. We also want to be aware of the risk of antimicrobials. So the biggest one is probably antibiotic resistance. When we add antimicrobial treatments to our materials around us, we may be unknowingly creating superbugs that will end up surviving against those certain antimicrobial treatments. And if we become sick from that bacteria, it may actually be resistant to the antibiotics that we would get from our doctor. The second point here is that antimicrobials can lead to a false sense of safety. So people may think that if they put antimicrobial surfaces around them that they'll be protected from, certain bacteria and viruses, and it could lead to less thorough cleaning, even though antimicrobial surfaces still need to be cleaned regularly and thoroughly, just like a surface without a treatment would need to be. And then finally, another risk here is that they can cause harm to human health and to the environment. So some antimicrobial chemicals may be carcinogens, so cancer-causing chemicals. They could be respiratory irritants, or they could be skin irritants. And they can also wear off over time and get into our waterways and bioaccumulate in our environments and cause additional harm there. So from our point of view, we really think that everyone should be taking a precautionary approach and weighing all these risks against the potential benefits. We think a better solution here would be to look for sustainable materials. So things that are going to be durable, contain recycled content, be recyclable, and overall, they're using healthy materials, but also stand up against the regular and thorough cleaning with the disinfectants and cleaners that are being recommended to stop the COVID-19 virus. The good news here is that we really shouldn't have to modify our specifications too much in order to meet these new cleaning guidelines. There are still a variety of materials and fabrics available that not only look nice, but are also easily cleanable. And so some examples of cleanable materials would be things that are inherently cleanable, like a bleach cleanable fabric, more durable glass dividers in between workstations, or going with laminate panels. So things that are non-porous, and being easily cleanable will contribute to stopping the spread of viruses, as well as support our new way of working. And I want to make one note about glass. So here in the States, we've been receiving lots of questions about whether customers should go with a piece of glass for a divider, or if they should go with a plexiglass or acrylic surface instead. And we've done some research on these materials, and what we have been recommending is actual glass, because it's a harder, more durable material, and so it's more scratch resistant than plexiglass. So if you accidentally clean your plexiglass or your acrylic screen with the wrong cleaner or the wrong cloth, you could actually scratch it, which won't make it look good. So we're inclined to recommend glass because it is more durable and it'll stay looking nicer longer. So once we have specified our cleanable surfaces, we need to remember that we still have to clean them. And so it's a good idea here to follow the cleaning and care guides from your manufacturer so that you don't unknowingly damage your furniture. And I want to share a quick example of a customer issue that we had here in the States. We had a customer who was in a healthcare setting that was using a very harsh caustic cleaner on their fabric chair seats. And so they would spray this cleaner on and then not wipe it away. And over time, the fabric actually started to disintegrate and they had to order some new seats. So if you're ever unsure about how to clean your furniture, we encourage you to reach out to your furniture partners to understand what cleaning protocols can be used. HNI India has created some new cleaning guidelines, and our other manufacturer, Lamix, is also working on a guide. So following this information will help ensure that your materials are not adversely affected by any new cleaning protocols. And customers can use this information to help educate their staff on how to clean, and then from there work with their cleaning teams to set up things like visual cues for employees so that people know what's been cleaned or what still needs to be cleaned, as well as avoid any damage to your materials. And throughout the presentation, we've added some links to the U.S. CDC, the Center for Disease Control, and OSHA, the Occupational Health and Safety Administration, for their recommendations on how to clean your workplace. And so finally, it's important to keep in mind other protocols that we can implement to help make our workspaces cleaner, as well as make our employees feel safe. So we can provide access to cleaning materials so that employees can use them on their own in addition to the regular cleaning programs that are taking place. And in this way, it can help employees feel a little bit safer in their environments, knowing that their surfaces are clean, that they're coming into contact with. We can also implement protocols like clean desk policies, so having people clean off their desk at the end of the day to facilitate that cleaning overnight. And we can offer additional tools like hooks or monitor arms or little caddies or containers that hook into vertical surfaces so that we can get items up off the workspaces and work surfaces and make cleaning easier. And we can implement these protocols both at individual workstations as well as throughout the rest of our spaces and conference rooms and common areas to really facilitate cleaning of all spaces. And now I'll turn it back over to Lisa.
Okay. Pam, did you have a quick question for Courtney, as long as she's on, around materiality?
Yes, a question came in around materialities. It says, will modular furniture move to a more sustainable future? What are the new designs going forward?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And it's something that we've been thinking about a lot is everyone seems to be very reactive right now. They want to install, temporary barriers and dividers in their spaces. But what we want to push people to think about is what's going to happen with your materials after you no longer need them. And so in some cases, if it makes sense, we are advising our customers to look for more permanent solutions and still choose sustainable materials. But I think the sustainability of materials becomes very, very important if we are just looking for temporary solutions. And so we want to look for items that contain recycled content, so they're not being made from virgin materials. We also want to look for materials that are made with recyclable content. So something that when you no longer need it, you can actually recycle it and it can be made into a new product versus just going straight to the nearest landfill. I think it's also important to look at where materials are being sourced. So are they being sourced from responsible locations, places where the environment is not being adversely affected by the extraction or harvesting process, and then the companies that you're purchasing from, are they aware of their environmental impacts? What are they doing to try to reduce those? So we can think about all of these things, but I think whether you are looking for temporary or permanent solutions, you should absolutely be considering the sustainability of your materials.
Great. Thank you, Courtney. Okay, we'll move on to the second phase here of consider and solve. And this is where we really get into the product solutions to help with social distancing. So we've all been seeing these ideas about path of travel and checkerboarding or every other workstation. So certainly it's up to each individual situation to do a deep study, but we think that alternating workstations in the short or interim can be the simplest way to make sure we have the correct distancing, but there's other layers to consider. So, we're doing a lot with individual screening at the desk. Then we're looking at additional, what we're calling end of run. So these very simple, easy to clean gallery panels to not only define the corridors, but again, it's another highly cleanable surface to protect the more heavier traffic along the corridors, or even adding additional planters that can introduce biophilia, again, thinking about that human impact as we experience the space. And then on another level, going vertical, thinking about adding more architectural elements that create more division between neighborhoods, but that it's functional division. As we've moved to more benching type applications, we've lost a lot of that vertical space where we would be able to pin things up and scribe and ideate together. So, we're getting many more requests for this type of installation to help support some distancing. And then of course, path of travel is very important to avoid collisions. So a big question we keep getting is, can you just tell us, please, what height do we have to, that we will safe to protect the transmission of COVID? And it's really not that simple. So again, all of us on this call continue to scan the CDC, the World Health Organization, and others to see if there's new guidelines. And we're still not really seeing that it's saying, if you do this height. So instead, we want to arm you with the information we know to be latest and true. And so here you're seeing a visual, which is a bit daunting, of an actual sneeze cloud. And new research shows that a sneeze cloud can be up to 25 feet and even beyond. So, you know, think about, we keep talking about 6 feet or 2 or 3 meters or whatever it is for your particular region, what those guidelines are. The point is, the 6 foot is that a guideline. It also means wearing a mask. So we want to be mindful of this. And also, I appreciate this image because it shows the droplets, how they go up into the air. And this is why organizations such as OSHA are really heavily pushing the cleaning of ventilation systems. So what are we doing since we don't have a concrete answer? We're giving you the information we can. So we've taken an elevation view and we're showing both in seated and standing position, what are some of those dimensions and what can we do to help with that? So we're looking at some additional barriers. So here we have fixed barriers, which is, again, we are seeing some additive elements onto a more traditional panel type element. We're seeing, excuse me, additional ideas such as what we're calling a threshold at the entry. Think of a door as you walk into your home, having a little bit taller element that kind of creates someone to pause before they naturally try to go in to talk to someone as a reminder. These have a pull-out door, so you could pull that out as a signaling to say, you know, be mindful of the 6 foot space. And then also, again, making sure we have opportunities for barriers that would actually move up and down with the user. So it's not uncomfortable if I'm standing up and this person's sitting down and they're feeling very anxious about that closeness and proximity. So here are just a couple other ideas we're working with through clients. I hear a lot, you know, this idea of removing every other chair. It sounds really simple, but I had one client who has over 1,000 seats on one floor, and they said, Lisa, where am I going to put 500 chairs? Let alone make sure they don't disappear, get damaged. You know, I would have to pay to store them. And I simply, in this time, do not have the funding. I mean, we're furloughing people. I can't spend the money. So very good point. We have other different ideas for you. They're not product solution. They're others. You know, here, the idea of potentially having a plant placed in every other, or simply wrapping bands around the chairs that are not to be used, are just some simple ideas. We also can really consider orientation. Again, we know so many of us have moved towards more benching applications. If you have a bench that happens to be more of a freestanding bench because of height adjustability, one of the most successful things we've been doing is rotating individuals into more of a pinwheel application. And I will show you that this is a current space that we're doing a analytics study on pinch points and traffic flow. So here you can start to see where these green dots, if you will, they're going to populate now. This is showing a before-after study of, if you see all these workstations here on the left in a bench application, because they did not offer exactly 6 feet between users, we would have been able to use every other. Therefore 50% utilization on this side. Whereas over here, you're seeing all of these are being able to be used because of they simply rotated and the distancing between them was achieved. Other ideas, if you look in the lower left corner, this is again another one of HNI facility in Iowa, our customer experience center, where we had these quite generous corridors. There is a lot of traffic. It is a call center. We went ahead and added in these partitions that, again, opportunities for stand-up meetings and agile team support. But we've, you know, also the idea of graphically representing those 6 foot bubbles as a reminder of what that looks like. Each person is assigned a color for a marker. You know, I have purple, Courtney has blue, Lauren has green, you know, simple things like that. So we're trying not to all be touching each other's tools, you know, using mindful practices. Here again, this is another room at this same customer experience center. As I said before, because we don't have the opportunity to remove all the chairs, we've simply applied bands to 2 of the chairs. We have added signage at every single entry and this very simple graphic, and it does say maximum 2 persons, so it's very clear. In addition, we have gone in and updated our Microsoft platforms for Outlook, I should say, for all scheduling. Room scheduling has now been decreased by 50% online. So as people do start to come together, they have to adjust the rooms that they would normally book because we're decreasing that. Additional ideas, we've in the last few weeks developed new attachments for hand sanitizers that can actually clip onto the walls, or we have freestanding versions. We're taking these planters. When we talk about design, you know, this is nice because we've really had a lot of interest in these planters, removing the plants, putting them in the every other workstation for a time being, and then using this as a cleaning station. I love the idea of anything that's dual purpose, and to Courtney's point, it's, you know, we're not throwing it away afterwards, we're repurposing it. So moving, that's, you know, a lot of solo spaces. Now let's kind of talk more about social collaborative spaces. We're all excited to get back and have that face-to-face interaction. These spaces are going to be a little more challenging because they're owned by many, not one person. But let's be thoughtful and creative around how we can add additional ways of screening that aren't quite as literal as a plexiglass stand, for example. This particular element is a beautiful wood screen. It's very warm in its tone, and you can still see light or a person moving behind, or a planter. Simple things like in lounge areas, are you able to just pivot? And here we've rotated 180 degrees and we create a yin yang application. People are not talking to each other, they're facing opposite, and you can start to break these elements apart. Another example from our own corporate cafe, we have gone ahead, I put a link in here just showing how simple these bands are. I think they are $6 for 10 of them. So again, we're, you know, we understand so many of our clients, we're in a budget situation with, you know, having to have let people go, not sure about how the economy is going to be turning around. So let's think creatively here. But again, I think about if I were to look at this table and if I removed 5 of the chairs, it would feel really awkward. So I'm going to put my bag on this chair with the black ribbon on it, and I can sit and someone can be seated down here and we could talk. And it wouldn't, I don't think it would feel quite as strange, honestly. You will see here throughout every single surface has one of these cleaning notifications and social distancing, and then also cleaning stations are located throughout. Touching a little bit more on poka-yoking, to wrap up this section, we really are doing, a question came in earlier about shape or product development. We're really studying and intrigued by shape and how shape can define the number of people, you know, how these can be repurposed. So a very traditional, more racetrack shaped table, just by simply splitting it and rotating it, where now you can tell it's really intended for only 2 people. And what would have been designed as a continuous bench where you could cram a lot of people on there, to signify by simple seat pads that we really want to place these 6 feet apart. They could be applied with a Velcro or a removable item, so we're not defacing that. But it again is giving guidance to how people are spaced apart. New product development. This is new that we just designed for a client in Washington, D.C. And they were moving to to a smaller footprint for their individual offices or cabins, these kind of calling them micro offices, but within the footprint, we're seeing more, how do you have height adjustability and then also a zone for collaboration. But the way this delineation happens, it can feel very natural, but it also signifies that these are 2 zones. So we're trying to build in some signaling. A couple other examples of that 1-to-1 ratio I spoke of before. Simple things such as this shape over here that really say one person to each seat, but as you can imagine, if we flip these around, we can reconfigure these into a square, into long linear tables, such as a training center over time. But these are the kinds of things we're really working with right now, where this individual picnic table, just by how we group it, we're going to provide enough distance. Same with this long linear sofa, where we've simply flipped them around, where it was a group for 8 people that could sit here together. We've now got 2 smaller groups for 2 to 3. So these idea starters are something we are working on every day, and we're taking clients' examples and saying, you know, what do I do, and how can we simply either modify or add some intermediate pieces or space things apart. Just kind of thought starters in general. This was a specific client request that the team on this call had worked on in Shanghai, as an example, and really studying how can we rework our workflow, and how can the workstations be, you know, more socially distanced in a really positive manner. So certainly the team can share more ideas, and we hope that you reach out to us for that kind of help. This is another example of a client request where here's their existing layout, and we've gone through and identified each and every area, from changing this to a solo room, to adding a freestanding hand sanitizer, to adding additional height adjustable screens, adding glass, adding planters. So it's just going through each area, and this is what we're continually doing right now, are these consultative studies for our clients. So as we move on to phase 3, so now we've done all these great ideas, we've implemented it. What we want to do is make sure there is a feedback loop. Is there an anonymous email that goes to someone in facilities that is gathering any concerns that people aren't maybe comfortable speaking out? Any methodology to get that communication gathered is key. And then once we have that, let's make sure we're doing a town hall every Friday. We're reporting out. We're sharing the positive things that we've seen. And then we're going to do it all over again. So for those of us who've been designers for a long time, we've always talked about post-occupancy surveys. I'll speak personally for myself. You know, I found that as soon as we would get through one project, we were on to the next 20, and we didn't necessarily, or the client maybe didn't have the time, or you know, there wasn't the fee, and it was missed. And I would just encourage us all that post-occupancy surveys, you know, they may take on a life of their own, because I think this is going to be a continual process. So to wrap it all up, again, both Lauren and Courtney, as well as myself, we've been talking about these in this continuous feedback loop, and the sample questions and potential ideas. We have an entire ebook series that goes through much, much more. We just did snapshots for you to get an idea of how the book works. So please know that that is a resource that we're going to share with you as well. So I will turn it back over to you, Pam, and we'll get going with our second set of polling questions.
Okay, while we run the poll, we have 2 questions in the poll. One, what solutions have you most frequently designed to support return to work efforts, if you have? And then secondly, how have you used Poka-yoke planning methodologies for group settings? And while we're waiting for the poll to run, we're going to address another question that was submitted to us. And this is a $50,000 question. How can we learn to live and work with the virus?
Woo!
That's a tough one.
You know, I kind of go back to a lot of those examples Lauren had. To me, it's handling this with grace and gratitude, with learning more about ourselves and our micro communities, and you know, just building upon out of everything negative comes something positive, I believe. And so we're going to learn new technologies. We're challenging ourselves to create and innovate with materiality, much of the things that Courtney spoke to. But I just think human behavior, I'm hoping a kinder, you know, more resilient world we come out of this. But, you know, Lauren, do you have anything you'd want to add to that?
Yeah, I think too, it's important to consider that individuals definitely have a lot of responsibility when we're thinking about living and working with the virus, but we really need to step back and take a holistic view on all of the elements that are going to make this possible. So the individual definitely has responsibilities, but the built environment needs to support the individual in doing those healthy activities, and the work culture also needs to support those activities as well. So I think it's not going to be one thing, it's not going to be one time, but really this holistic view supporting us through this.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Thanks, ladies. That's a tough question. So you did good. Okay, let's go ahead and close out the poll and let's see the results. So what solutions most frequently designed? Introduction of additional screening. And how have you used Poka-Yoke? Most people have not used it yet, but think it's a great idea.
Okay.
Okay, well, we're going to go ahead and wrap up for today. And I want to thank everyone for participating. Please tune in for our next webinar, which will be 2 weeks from today on work from home, distributed work. And we're showing on the screen right now some resources available. We'll be sharing a copy of this webinar with all of you, and you'll be able to download from the links that we're attaching the resources. Lisa, do you want to say anything about those resources?
Yes, thanks, Pam. Just real quick, this Ready for What's Ahead is based on the discussion we had today. It has thought starters, it has great content, so check that out, please, if you're interested. And then this is a newer resource we just became involved with or aware of, and it's by an organization called WORK, and many of you may have heard of this, Workplace Operator Readiness Council. I think it is a really well done piece. It's a lot of words. There's not a lot of imagery, but the content is amazing in that basically it covers topics from HVAC, air control, kitchens, transportation, everything. There is a point of view, and then there's immediately an end user spotlight and what they've done to solve. We always love to know what others do in our roles at other organizations. So I would highly recommend, and here is the link, to check out that document, because I think it could be very useful to all of us.
Thank you, Lisa. Raul, did you want to say anything to wrap things up?
Yeah, so thank you everyone for being with us today. And we have seen a lot of these concepts and ideas of practical applications, how we can evolve our workplaces. So if you have any questions, you can reach out to us. You have our contacts here, and we will join you guys soon with the next webinar. Thank you so much.